one of the co-founders of CODEPINK, and when you guys started this organization back in 2002, it was because you want to oppose U.S. wars on Iraq. And then over all these years, you guys also been standing with people from Venezuela, Cuba, Iran against America's sanctions and wars towards those countries. It's definitely not an easy job when the government is warmongering, like a lot of politicians is very warmongering. So what motivated you guys to continue to do this for such a long time?
Well, I want to add to that we also opposed the US intervention in Afghanistan. And all of these years, now 20 years, we have been opposing that military presence as well. And what keeps us going is that we have an opportunity to talk to people, sometimes in person because we travel to countries like Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and we meet with the people who are victims of our interventions, or we talk to refugees who have had to flee those situations, people in Pakistan, for example, whose families were killed by US drone strikes that we met with and saw how their lives had been destroyed. And knowing that our government is so involved in military aggression and that this hurts us at home. When I see people unhoused in the United States, when I know that many of my friends don't even have health care, when I have young friends who are students who have tens of thousands of dollars in debt, then I realize how much we are taking the money that should be going to these positive things and instead putting it into a war machine that just kills and maims and destroys. And I don't want my government to be representing me like that around the world. And the other people who are members of CODEPINK feel the same way. We want to live in a world where we interact with each other in peaceful ways. We use diplomacy. You know, just like if your children are in school and start fighting with each other, you'll stop them and you'll say, no, that's not the way to resolve problems. I think on the global level, we feel like our country is a big bully that is using its high tech and its wealth to impose its will, or try to, because obviously we don't win in these wars, but tries to do that. And it reflects terribly on us as a people. And the last thing I want to say about that is that we also know that a lot of our policies are being dictated by companies that make these huge profits from war and death and destruction. And I live in Washington, D.C. The suburbs of Washington, especially in Northern Virginia, have become the richest suburbs in the entire country, more than the high-tech areas of Silicon Valley or the Wall Street in New York City. They are the richest counties because of these military contracts. The military has so much money, billions and billions of dollars every year, that go to these companies that make weapons and have contracts with the Pentagon. And they're the ones who really get rich off of this. And that's not the way we want to see our tax dollars invested.
But when the US military, when they went to another country, when they invaded Afghanistan, they gave themselves a very sounds righteous reasons. We went there because it's a war on terror. We went there to build their nation, to liberate their people. What do you make of that?
Well, we think that that is always a justification for the aggression. After 9/11, there was a lot of public support for war because people were feeling they wanted to get back at those who attacked us. But the people in power really used the attack of September 11th, 20 years ago, to justify invading other countries, not just Afghanistan, but Iraq, that have absolutely nothing to do with the 9/11 attack. And we also know that of the 19 hijackers involved in the 9/11 attacks, 15 of them were from Saudi Arabia. But the US never wanted to invade Saudi Arabia. On the contrary, our government sells billions of dollars in weapons to Saudi Arabia that uses those weapons to kill and hurt people in neighboring Yemen. So we know that it really is not true that the US goes in to liberate other people. The US goes in to try to take over nations, install US friendly governments, use their resources, but not to liberate people. If after 20 years in Afghanistan, you see that the people are among the poorest in the world, and you see that they don't even have decent infrastructure. We didn't even do that in 20 years. Majority of the people don't even have electricity. You can see that the US is not going there to help people.
Because you were among those several activists that delivered the signatures to PBS, asking them to stop censoring the documentary about China's poverty alleviation project. So I'm curious, why do you think this documentary is important for viewers in America?
I live in the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. Well, just across the street from me is a guy sleeping on the outside of a building, a school building. He comes every night and leaves during the day, comes back. Or I can go a few blocks away and see tents set up that are homeless people. Or I can go the other way under a bridge and see it lined up with people that have nowhere to live and are just living on the street. And this is happening in cities all over the United States. And that's just the extremely unfortunate people who don't have housing. And then there are so many people who might have a roof over their head, but live in extreme poverty. And so I think it's important for us to do everything we can to learn how other countries are dealing with poverty. And when I saw that film on China, I was just astounded. I was amazed that so much effort by so many different layers of government down to students in university would be so involved in trying to lift so many people out of poverty in ways that are structural, so they won't fall back into poverty a few months later. So it is very important for us to learn some of that. Now, I'm not saying that the US could just take a program like that and transport it here. Very different societies and things that the American people would not be comfortable with, people coming into their house, for example, and asking them all about their income. Americans are very individualistic like that. But I think there are other lessons to be learned about the tremendous laser-like focus of the Chinese system on lifting millions and millions of people out of poverty.
Since when CODEPINK started to stand up for China, if I can say that, if that's the right way to describe it? So, and is there any future campaigns in plan?
Well, we have a campaign called China is Not Our Enemy. So it's not really so much standing up for China, it's saying that we don't want to be in a conflict with China. We don't want to go to war with China. We want to have friendly relations with China. And so if there are things that China does good, like alleviating poverty internally, we think American people should have the right to know that. But most importantly for us is to stop our government's aggression against China. We already see the ramifications of that with the anti-Asian hate crimes that have gone up so much here in the United States, with the blaming of China for coronavirus. And we also see it in the justification for our enormous military budget, which so overshadows the amount of money that China spends on its military. But we are constantly being told that China is spending more money on its military. China has all these high-tech weapons. We have to invest more in order to compete with China. And because Code Pink has as our fundamental basis that we want to free up this money that we spend on the Pentagon and instead put it into things like healthcare and dealing with the climate crisis, as long as our government is able to convince people that China is this enemy, then they will continue to be able to rob us by putting so much of the money that's needed for other things into militarism, high-tech weapons, drone warfare, artificial intelligence, all of these things that we're told are necessary to compete with China. So that's why our campaign is called China is Not Our Enemy. And we think it's so important to educate people about the relationship between the US and China, and to convince them that we have to work together with China, cooperate to solve the globe's biggest problems together, like the climate crisis, instead of this militarized competition.